Hello and welcome to day 5, the final day of the Embrace Sports Bra Sew Along. I'm Sharon and I'm glad that you are back. So today we are putting our finishing touches on the bra. We are trying it on now that we have our bottom band in. Everything should be exactly as it should be for you to check the fit. If you need to remove extra from your shoulders, go ahead and do some. After you have done that, this is your last call to put in your bra pads, if you need any bra pads. After we get this binding on, you're not going to be able to put them back in without ripping a lot of stitches. So don't forget if you haven't done it already. So after you've done that, we're doing the neck binding. Let's go ahead and get into sewing. I can't wait to see all the bras that everyone makes, and thank you so much for joining me. Okay, so this is the time where you're going to try your bra on. You're going to see how it fits. Your band should be completely in. This is also, if you haven't put cups in it yet, then go ahead and put some cups in between your main and your lining. If you waited this long to do it, you're not going to be able to just sew them in with your machine, because then it would show on the front. But what I do is I just go in and tack the corners in by hand with some thread. And then also you're going to check and see if you need to remove any out of the shoulders. I think I'm going to go ahead and remove another maybe ½ inch just to give myself a little bit more lift. Another thing that I really want you to look at is to see if your main and your lining, if they completely line up, or if there is a little extra on your lining that needs to be trimmed off. See, mine does. I have a little bit. One way to know how much to trim is you can kind of look. I can tell that's 1/8 of an inch. Another thing you can do is to get some wash away Wonder Tape and actually just kind of tape that edge to itself, so that when you take the bra off, you know exactly how much it is overlapping there. But another thing to think about is if you like how high your neckline is. If you feel like it's too high for you, this is your chance right here to just fold your bra in half and then take an even amount, just kind of scoop it out right here. If you do make any adjustments, if you take any out of the shoulders, if you scoop out your neckline any, then we need to completely recalculate the binding before we apply it in the next step. We're going to calculate it at 85%, but once you have everything the way you love it, then we'll do binding. But don't do binding until everything is exactly how you would like it. And making sure that this is all even right here. If it's not that even, then you're going to have like some creases in your bra that don't like that. So anyways, okay, so let's calculate binding after you've made all the adjustments that you need to make. I wanted to show you my neckline after I have removed the ½ inch I wanted. So now it doesn't match up, because the sports bra gets wider as it gets closer down on your racer back, and it also gets narrower as you get farther here. So I'm just going to trim it off. So don't feel like you did anything wrong if you've had to remove length from the straps. You'll just want to get something to kind of smooth that out, and then do it evenly on each side. So I did it kind of jaggedly, so I'll just go and kind of smooth that until this is an even edge. And I'll do that on both sides. Okay, we are going to measure our neckline so that we can put our binding in. So to do that, I'm going to fold mine in half at the shoulder seams. And I'm going to start with measuring, and I'm going to lay it flat just so I'm not accidentally stretching it to get the measurement. So grab a measuring tape. I'm going to make sure to line up my shoulder seam. And I'm getting 4 inches. And since it's in half, I know the back of my bra is 8 inches. So now I'm going to do the same thing on my front neckline. I'm going to measure that. Do your best to not stretch. And I know that there's like cups in there, so you want to just do your best that it's laying flat. And you see where I trimmed it and it's not that even, but that's okay. It'll even up whenever I sew on it. And on this one, I'm getting 7 1/4. So 7 times 2 is 14. That'd be 14 1/2. So 14 1/2 plus 8 is, let's see, 22 1/2. So now I'm going to take the number 22 1/2 and then I'm going to multiply it by 0.85. Okay, so if my entire neckline around here is 22.5 and then 85% of that is 19.125. So I'm going to add in my seam allowance, and that would give me, I'm only going to take like a 1/4 inch seam allowance whenever I do those. So that would give me 19.625, which is 19 5/8 of an inch. So that is the piece of binding that now I'm going to cut to go around my bra. Okay, so now I'm going to cut my binding. So mine is 19 5/8 inches long, and the width is a 1.25. So 1 1/4 inch is the width of your binding. So I'm going to use this little awkward piece right here. So I have my binding piece. Now I'm going to take my binding and put the short ends together. And whatever seam allowance you added to your 85%, that's the amount that you will sew this down right here. So I'm just going to go sew this with a stretch stitch like that. Okay, I sewed that short end, and now I'm just going to make a mark on where the halfway point is when I folded that on the other side. So now I have my halfway points, and then now I'm going to meet that up. So I'm just quartering this binding so that I can apply it to the neckline. So my binding piece has the 1/4 points marked. So now I'm going to grab my bra, and I'm going to mark 1/4 points on this. I've marked my back. Let's see, did I mark? I did not mark my front. Okay, so I have to mark where the halfway point is on my front, on the middle center of my bra. And then now I'm going to take the bra front and match it to the bra back to get my halfway point there. This is just like you would quarter a neckline on a knit t-shirt. My 1/4 points marked there. So now I'm going to take my binding piece. I guess I should move all my scraps out of the way. And I'm going to put this center seam, or the back seam, into the back. I'm going to put it right sides together with the back of the bra. And I'm not folding this, so it's not a band, it's binding. So it is just flat onto the back, right sides together, like this. And then I'm going to match up each of my 1/4 points. Okay, so I have the binding clipped to my neckline, and I'm going to apply it with my serger. You can also use a stretch stitch on your sewing machine. And I am going to have to stretch the binding, and I want the binding to be what's facing up on my sewing machine. It just gives you a little bit more control of stretching it, and it means you don't stretch the neckline any while you're applying it. To make sure all 3 edges are flush against each other. And I'm not going to trim any off. I'm just going to have my serger going on the edge of the fabric. And it shouldn't be like a great stretch. An 85% binding stretch is just a slight stretch. Okay, so the 2 different ways that you can apply the binding is when you wrap it around to the back. Here, I'll show you on this side. Whenever you wrap it around to the back, you can just leave it single, like 1 layer like that. Or you can fold it under and do it like this. If you're gonna do it like that, you need to clip it all the way around before you start. It just makes it so much easier if you just go and clip it all the way around. But if you're just doing a single layer, it'll be thinner, and then after you're done sewing it, we'll trim it down. I'm gonna do mine single layer. I have shirts where I've done both. If you have a thick fabric, you definitely want to do the single layer. If it's not a thick fabric, or if you put clear elastic, you'll definitely want just a single layer because it'll be too thick along the edges. But if it's thin, then you can definitely do a single layer. I also like that method sometimes if I'm using a twin needle. Okay, so now I'm going to show you if you want to add elastic to the neckline. So after you have applied your binding. You could do this at the same time as you apply the binding. The only issue is that you're dealing with 4 layers of fabric, one of them being elastic, so it's harder to get as clean of an edge. And then you're stretching the binding. So I find it easier to just apply the binding, and then after that, go back, and if you want the extra support that it gives you to have the clear elastic in the neckline, then go back and add it. So I'm just going to do it 1 for 1 like I did in the seams, but I'm going to put it on the main side. I first put it on the wrong side, and I did not like it on the wrong side because it can kind of peek out when you do the single fold binding. You don't want to do double fold binding whenever you put the clear elastic because it's just going to make that seam so bulky. So you're going to want to do single fold binding. You're going to want to put it on this side right here. So this is the bra, and this is the binding, and I'm going to apply it on top of that binding. So the bra, the right side is showing, the right side of the binding is on top of the bra, and I'm putting it onto the wrong side of the binding, just on top of that seam, all the way around. I'll use a zigzag and zigzag it on, and I'm going to try as much as I can not to overlap that seam any, and just to do it directly on top of that seam. And then after that, I can wrap it over it and then stitch the binding down with a stretch stitch. Okay, let's do it. Okay, so I am doing the cover stitching. I'm stitching down the binding. So all I need to do is just fold it up and over this seam allowance. So it's just like that in the back. And then I'm just going to stitch it down. I'm doing it at the cover stitch machine, but you can do it on your regular sewing machine. When I've done it on my regular sewing machine, I like to use a twin needle. I think that it finishes it really, really well. It gives the same double stitching on this side. The double row is stitching on the right side. And you just want to go take your time, wrap it around, look at it, see that it looks nice and even and it looks good. You don't want to stretch it out. Okay, now all I have left is to trim the inside of my binding. You want to get a sharp pair of scissors and take your time, because you do not want to accidentally slice through your bra. That would be really, really sad. And you just want to trim off all this edge, all that's left over. You just want to trim it off and get it as flush as you can. Okay, I just want to show you what the binding looks like finished. There's the right side. There's my inside. You can see where I've tacked my pads down. The only other thing that I might do, that I could do, is if I wanted to go back and tack down the seam allowance so that my seam allowance on my band isn't shifting around. You can stitch it to the elastic itself, and that also keeps your elastic from shifting, or you can push it up and stitch it to the bra itself. And if you do it that way, then you might want to go in and tack your elastic in a few places, just so that whenever you wash it or whatever, that the elastic doesn't get twisted around inside that casing.